You want to know something nobody talks about? The gap between who you are right now and who you could become in 5 years doesn't come down to talent. It doesn't come down to luck. It doesn't even come down to opportunity. It comes down to one single habit that most people never develop, never recognize, and never use. And here's the tragedy. The people who win, the people who build empires, the people who transform their lives and the lives of everyone around them, they don't guard this habit like it's a secret. They practice it so naturally that they don't even realize they're doing it. But by the end of this conversation, you're going to see your entire life differently, because you'll finally understand what separates the people who make it from the people who don't. I've spent my entire life studying success. Not the kind of success you see on magazine covers. I mean the real stuff. The kind that happens behind closed doors. The kind that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary ones. And what I discovered might shock you because it's so simple that most people walk past it every single day without ever seeing it. The habit isn't about motivation. It isn't about working 18-hour days. It isn't about making huge, dramatic changes overnight. Those things are myths. They're stories we tell ourselves when we're not ready to hear the truth. The truth is much more elegant than that. The truth is that winners possess one habit that changes everything, and I'm going to show you exactly what it is and how to use it. But here's where it gets interesting. When I tell you what this habit is, your first reaction might be disappointment. You might think, that's it? That's the big secret. That's exactly what most people think. That's why most people stay stuck. They're looking for something complicated, because they believe that real change requires pain. It requires suffering. It requires sacrifice. And while sacrifice does play a role in exceptional achievement, the daily habit that precedes all of that is something far more accessible than you think. Let me tell you about a man named Thomas. He was ordinary in every way. Grew up in a middle-class neighborhood, went to a public school, had a job that paid the bills but didn't inspire him. At 32 years old, he looked at his life and realized he was invisible. Not invisible to others, invisible to himself. He wasn't living, he was existing. Day after day, the same routine, the same conversations, the same results. Sound familiar? Then one evening, sitting in his apartment, something changed. Not dramatically, not through some earth-shattering moment. He simply decided to start paying attention. That's it. That's where it began. Thomas started observing himself. When did he reach for his phone instead of reading? When did he make excuses instead of taking action? When did he settle for less than he was capable of? He didn't judge himself. He didn't get angry or frustrated. He simply became aware. Within 3 months of this single habit, just paying attention, his entire life shifted. His relationships improved because he started noticing when he was being present and when he was checked out. His work improved because he became aware of his patterns of procrastination. His health transformed because he finally saw, with clarity, what he was actually eating and how it made him feel. Everything changed from awareness. The habit that separates winners from everyone else is this: they observe their own behavior with brutal honesty. Now let me explain why this matters so much, because most people completely miss the power of it. You cannot change what you do not see. That's the foundation of everything. You could read 100 books on productivity and still be just as unproductive if you're not aware of what you're actually doing moment by moment. You could have the best diet plan in the world and still gain weight if you're not observing what you're actually eating. You could buy all the right tools and technology and still be ineffective if you're not watching your own behavior patterns. Winners understand this. They have what I call the observer's mind. They develop an almost scientific approach to their own lives. They notice when they're slipping. They catch themselves before small problems become big ones. They see patterns that others completely miss. And because they see these patterns, they can adjust. They can correct course before it's too late. Think about a ship's captain navigating the ocean. If that captain isn't watching the instruments, isn't observing the weather, isn't paying attention to the current and the waves, the ship will drift off course, maybe just a few degrees, maybe just a little bit. But over time, over distance, that tiny drift becomes a complete miss. The destination changes. The journey is wasted. Your life works the same way. Every single day, you're making tiny course corrections. You're deciding whether to check your email or work on what matters. You're choosing whether to have the conversation that needs to happen or avoid it. You're picking whether to do the work today or push it to tomorrow. These aren't big, dramatic decisions. They're small ones. They're ordinary. But they compound. Here's what most people don't realize. They never actually see these decisions. They never observe them happening. So they can't make different ones. They're on autopilot, operating from habits they didn't even choose, responding to patterns they're not aware of, and then they wonder why their life doesn't change. Winners are different. They've trained themselves to be conscious, awake. They notice when they're building them up and when they're tearing them down. They observe when they're moving toward their goals and when they're drifting away. This awareness gives them power, the power to choose, the power to change, the power to become something different. I want to tell you about another person, a woman named Sarah. She had been trying to start her own business for 7 years. 7 years of trying. And in those 7 years, she did exactly nothing. Not because she was lazy, not because she didn't care, but because she never observed her own resistance. She never noticed the moment the fear kicked in. She never saw the pattern of her own avoidance. So when that moment came, and it came every single day, she just lived it without understanding it. Then one day, a mentor asked her to do something different. He said, "For the next week, I want you to notice every time you feel the urge to work on your business, and every time you feel the urge to avoid it. Don't change anything, don't judge yourself. Just notice." At first, she thought it was pointless. How could simply noticing change anything? But by day 3, something shifted. She started seeing the pattern. She noticed that the resistance always came right after she made a decision about the business. She noticed that she would feel scared, then immediately find something else to do. She noticed that she was telling herself a story that she wasn't ready, that she didn't know enough, that she should wait until conditions were perfect. Once she saw that pattern, once she became aware of it, she could address it. She couldn't fix something she didn't see. But the moment she saw it, everything changed. Within 6 months, her business was generating income. Within 2 years, she had left her job. Within 5 years, she had built something remarkable. All of it started with observation. This is what winners know that others don't. They know that the secret to change isn't big action. It's small awareness. It's watching yourself with the same curiosity that a scientist watches an experiment. It's noticing what you do when you do it and why you do it. Let me give you something practical you can do right now. Tonight, before you go to bed, spend just 5 minutes writing down 3 moments from today where you made a choice. It could be anything: when you chose what to eat, when you chose what to focus on, when you chose how to respond to something. Just judge them, don't grade yourself, just become aware. Do this for a week. That's it. 7 days of 5-minute reflection. I promise you, something will shift. You'll start seeing patterns you never noticed before. You'll realize what's actually driving your behavior. And once you see it, you'll have the power to change it. But here's what happens next. Once you develop this habit of observation, something interesting occurs. You start making better decisions not just in one area of your life, but everywhere. Why? Because decision-making is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. The more you observe and choose deliberately, the better you become at choosing. A man named Marcus discovered this. He was an average student in high school. Not brilliant, not struggling, just average. But in college, something clicked. He started applying this habit to his studies. He observed when he was actually learning, and when he was just going through the motions. He noticed which study methods worked and which ones didn't. He watched his own energy levels and learning patterns. This observation habit transformed his grades. But it didn't stop there. He applied the same principle to his relationships. He noticed when he was genuinely connecting and when he was just performing. He observed what made conversations meaningful and what made them hollow. His relationships deepened. Then he applied it to his health. He observed how different foods made him feel. He noticed which types of exercise energized him versus which ones felt like punishment. He watched his own motivation and learned what actually sustains it. Today, Marcus runs a successful company. His team works for him, not because they have to, but because they respect him. His family is close and connected. His health is excellent. His finances are strong. And it all traces back to that single habit: observation. That's the compound effect of paying attention. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds good in theory, but isn't this just being self-aware? Don't most people do this already? The answer is no. Most people have what I call unconscious incompetence. They don't know what they don't know. They're operating from autopilot. They wake up, go through their routines, make thousands of tiny decisions, and never once stop to observe any of it. And here's the dangerous part. When life doesn't change, when they don't get the results they want, they blame external circumstances. They blame the economy. They blame their boss. They blame their upbringing. They blame luck. But the real culprit is that they never observed their own role in creating the situation. Winners don't do this. Winners look inward first. They ask themselves, what am I doing that's creating this result? What patterns am I repeating? What habits am I practicing? They take responsibility because they understand that responsibility is power. The moment you admit that you're creating your results, you also gain the power to create different results. I learned this early in my life through my work in sales. I wasn't naturally gifted at selling. In fact, I was shy. I was uncomfortable approaching people. But I had a manager who taught me something that changed everything. He said, don't focus on your fear, focus on what you're doing. So I started writing down every interaction, every conversation, every objection. I wasn't trying to fix anything yet. I was just observing. And what I discovered shocked me. I discovered that I wasn't actually listening to people. I was just waiting for my turn to talk. I discovered that I was leading with my product instead of understanding their needs. I discovered that my shyness wasn't the problem. My lack of awareness was. Once I saw what I was actually doing, I could change it. I started training myself to listen first, to ask questions, to understand before being understood. And my results didn't just improve, they transformed. My income tripled in 1 year. My confidence grew. My relationships with clients deepened. All of it flowed from observation. This is the habit you need to develop. Not thinking about changing, not wanting to change, but observing, becoming conscious of what you're actually doing. Because once you're conscious, once you're truly aware, change becomes inevitable. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. Here's something else that separates winners from everyone else. They understand that this habit never ends. They don't master it and move on. They know that the moment they stop observing is the moment they start drifting. That's why the most successful people I know have daily practices of reflection. They journal, they meditate, they review. They maintain that consciousness. A friend of mine, a billionaire entrepreneur, starts every morning with 30 minutes of reflection. He reviews the previous day. He observes what worked and what didn't. He notices his patterns and his patterns of thinking. He does this not because it's easy, but because he knows the cost of not doing it. He knows that one day of unconsciousness can create a cascade of decisions that take him off course. He told me once, the moment I stop paying attention is the moment I stop growing. And he's right. That's universal. That's true for everyone. So what does this look like practically? How do you actually develop this habit if you've never had it before? It's simpler than you think, but it requires consistency. First, start small. Don't try to observe everything. Pick one area of your life. Maybe it's your work productivity. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's your health. Pick one, and for the next 30 days, just watch it. Pay attention to your behavior in that area. Notice patterns. Don't try to fix anything yet. Just observe. Second, create a record. Write it down. Don't rely on memory. Keep a simple log or journal. When did I do this? Why did I do it? How did it feel? What was I thinking? This creates accountability and clarity. Writing forces you to be specific. You can't be vague on paper. Third, look for patterns. After a week or two of observation, patterns will emerge. You'll start seeing why you do what you do. You'll notice the triggers. You'll see what actually works and what doesn't. This is where the gold is. The pattern is the key. Fourth, once you see the pattern, you can make a conscious choice about it. You can decide if this pattern is serving you or hurting you. And here's this beautiful part. When you understand the pattern, changing it becomes much easier than if you just try to white-knuckle your way to a different behavior. This is what separates winners. They don't try to change their behavior through willpower alone. They change their behavior through understanding. And understanding comes from observation. Now, I want to tell you about what happens when you don't develop this habit. Because I want you to feel the weight of this decision. I want you to understand the stakes. People who never learn to observe their own behavior get stuck in what I call the repetition cycle. They repeat the same mistakes over and over. They have the same relationship patterns. They make the same financial decisions. They stay in the same situations. And they can't understand why their life doesn't change. I knew a man named Robert. For 30 years, he stayed in a job that made him miserable. He would complain constantly. He would tell anyone who would listen how much he hated his work. But he never actually looked at why he stayed. He never observed his own fear. He never examined his own beliefs about what was possible for him. So every day for 30 years, he woke up and made the same choice, unconsciously. He spent 1/3 of his life doing something he despised. The tragic part isn't that he was stuck. The tragic part is that he never even realized he could have been unstuck if he had just taken the time to observe why he was making the choice he was making. That's the cost of unconsciousness. That's what happens when you don't develop the habit of observation. You wake up one day and you've lost years, lost possibilities, lost potential. But here's the beautiful flip side of that story. The moment you develop this habit, everything accelerates. You don't need to work harder. You need to work more consciously. You don't need more time. You need to use your time more deliberately. You don't need better luck. You need better awareness. A woman I know named Elena started observing her life at 42. She realized she had been operating in a fog for years. Once she became aware, she transformed her entire existence in 5 years. She changed careers. She ended relationships that weren't working. She deepened relationships that were. She learned skills she never thought she could learn. She traveled to places she never thought she would go. When people would ask her what changed, she didn't talk about willpower. She didn't talk about working harder. She talked about awareness. She said, "I finally started paying attention to my own life." That's the magic of this habit. It's not complicated, it's not overwhelming, but it is powerful because it creates a foundation for everything else. Think about the compound effect of this. Right now, today, you make hundreds of micro decisions, small choices, tiny moments where you choose one thing over another. If those choices are made unconsciously, they'll probably be the same choices that led to where you are now. But if those choices start to become conscious, aware, deliberate, then something different becomes possible. A different result becomes inevitable. This is how small differences lead to massive gaps. This is how, 5 years from now, someone who develops this habit will be living in a completely different world than someone who doesn't. They won't necessarily be working much harder. They might even be working less. but they'll be working more intentionally. And intentionality compounds. I want you to understand something deeply. The habit that separates winners from everyone else isn't some mysterious thing that only special people possess. It's not genetic. It's not something you're born with. It's a choice. It's a decision you make to pay attention, to observe, to become conscious. And the beautiful part is that you can start right now, not tomorrow, not next Monday, not when conditions are perfect. Right now, today, you can start observing. You can start noticing, you can start becoming aware. This is the habit that changes everything. Not because it's complicated, but because it's the foundation for everything else. You can't change what you don't see. You can't improve what you're not aware of. You can't become different if you're not conscious of who you are right now. Winners understand this. That's why they're winners. Not because they're smarter, not because they were born into better circumstances, but because they developed one simple habit. They observe, they watch, they pay attention. So as we close, let me leave you with this. Starting tonight, choose one area of your life where you want to see a change. Could be anything. Your work, your relationships, your health, your finances, your creativity. Pick one. Then, for the next 7 days, just observe. Set aside 5 minutes each evening and write down 3 decisions or moments from that area. Don't change anything yet. Don't judge yourself. Just notice. Get curious. Become the observer of your own life. At the end of 7 days, I promise you'll see patterns you never saw before. Patterns that will give you the power to change. And that's where real transformation begins. The habit is simple. The results are extraordinary. All it requires is your attention. And that's something every single one of us has the power to give. If this conversation changed the way you think about yourself and your life, share it with someone else who needs to hear it. Because this habit isn't just for you. When you live consciously, you inspire others to do the same. That's how we change the world, one aware person at a time.